But the three things I really want everyone to take home with them today is how to apply a tourniquet, how to apply a pressure dressing, and how to do a blood sweep. So hey everybody, my name is Garrison. I'm going to be teaching Stop the Bleed today. We're going to keep it real basic, right? Because the goal is we want to go home with stuff that we can train with, not to just sit here in the middle of the desert and get overwhelmed with too much information, right? We want tangible things we can take home and practice with. A little bit about myself. I spent 6 years in the Army. I was a combat medic. I served in Afghanistan as a scout medic on the Afghan-Pakistani border for about 14.5 months. Then for about 9-10 months, I was in Iraq working with the State Department, training the Kurdish Peshmerga, where I actually developed their own combat first aid course for a bunch of dudes who never even had a biology class before, right? So that was pretty awesome. I will give them a shout out too, because they gave ISIS the business when they tried to show up to Kirkuk. So, I was really proud of those guys. So today what we want to do is we want to talk about Stop the Bleed. This is probably, especially when you're around firearms, or maybe you're out in the woods hunting, or maybe you're enjoying a snow cone, and somebody just has a bad day and wants to light up, a school bus or whatever, you know what I mean? This is probably going to be a really common type of injury. And you can go down all sorts of rabbit holes of what ifs and that kind of stuff. But the three things I really want everyone to take home with them today is how to apply a tourniquet, how to apply a pressure dressing, and how to do a blood sweep. There's a lot of other things you can do, right? But these are the three things you can take home with you, and then you can just practice. You're sitting on the couch, it's like during a commercial, right? Watching football. Go ahead and just start practicing some stuff, because anytime you have to do any type of task under stress, whether it's shooting, whether it's first aid, anything, you're gonna fall to your weakest point, right? And so we wanna train up our fundamentals, so we fall back on strong fundamentals that will help us achieve the task that we're doing. So an example would be, the first time I ever had to be a medic and, I got shot at when I was in the Army, I was scared shitless, man. I was 19 years old, people were real talk, they were trying to kill me. I was like, oh, but this is real, man, I'm a cool guy, I can kick it. But my body and my hands just did what they had to do, even though I was scared in my head, because I was fortunate enough to be trained well. And so that's where we want to get to with this. So when we get into Stop the Bleed, I want you to kind of understand, what's bleeding and why, right? So if we think of the body, right, what does blood do, right? Why is it important? Why do we got to keep it in the body, right? It's because blood takes oxygenated, or basically blood takes oxygen and perfuses it. It circulates it throughout your entire body to your vital organs, right? And then it takes kind of, any types of chemicals or waste, and then it kicks it out. So you breathe in oxygen through your lungs, and then your heart pumps that blood through to your lungs, and it takes oxygenated blood and through the arteries, it perfuses throughout your body, right? And then your veins bring it back to clean out, and then you breathe out carbon dioxide, right? That's what's happening here. And so there's three types of bleeds that we really need to think about: arterial, venous, and capillary. Now capillary is actually right here, where it happened to me when I was in the bush. It's very superficial. It's like when you nick your finger chopping a carrot and it doesn't, you're like, God damn it, you're just doing this forever with a paper towel or something. That's the least serious. A venous bleed, you're gonna see it coming out. It's gonna be this dark red, because right before it hit the air, it was actually blue, and it's full of waste and stuff like that. And it's gonna ooze out, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, depending on the seriousness of the bleed. And then an arterial bleed is actually gonna start pumping out, right? At the pace of your pulse, and it's gonna be bright red, and somebody's probably gonna be freaking the hell out. Or they're unconscious, even worse, right? And so what we want to do is we want to address those wounds. So the first thing we want to do is, first of all, where are our pulses? Can anybody tell me, give me a pulse? Right here on the neck, right? The wrist, right? Where else? Top of your foot, top of your thigh right here. Back of your knee. Also your arm, that's your brachial, right? And so one of the things that we're going to tell your vitals don't lie. When I was a medic, I used to say vitals don't lie, usually to people who were malingering and trying to get out of PT. But nonetheless, it applies to first aid as well. because this is your body pumping blood, right? So you can like check both sides at the same time, right? If they're not doing the same thing, if they don't feel the same, you know there's like an inconsistency, right? That's going to tell you what's going on. So the first thing, so now that we kind of have like a little bit of an overview of what we're talking about, right? We have this system that's pumping fluid, right? Kind of like your car pumps oil throughout different parts of your vehicle, right? And it performs a task, right? It keeps oxygen in our body, it gets waste out. I want to pause here for a moment, and I want to talk about a kit real quick, right? And what type of stuff we should have. And then we're going to get into how do we treat these, and then we'll practice on each other a little bit if we have time. But before I do, I know I'm talking a lot. So I'm going to pause for a moment, mostly for oxygen, and I just want to see what questions do we have so far.
What is, I guess, when you have venous bleeding or even arterial bleeding, is it, from a practical standpoint, worthwhile for everyday folks like us that have minimal training to kind of carry forceps, or even, I mean, because a lot of times we're carrying Israeli bandages or stop the, clotting bandages, whatever. And it seems like people are kind of picking up forceps now and then kind of going in that direction, like they're going to operate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how practical in your opinion is that?
I would say unless you're trained and proficient with it, don't do it, right? It's doing too much. Because let's think about, like, what does an arterial bleed do? It's going to kill you in like 5 minutes, right? And so you're going to be there playing operation with your patient. That's probably not going to add a lot of value to their life. What we want to do is immediately stop that bleed. And that's going to happen by applying pressure to the artery and slapping a tourniquet on there. And then as far as like a venous, and then if it's a venous bleed, you want to apply pressure, right? And then pack that wound if you can. Yes, sir.
Sorry, venous, like what's a rough, say you're bleeding out like a venous bleed, you die from that?
Absolutely, you could die from a venous bleed. Not as fast as an arterial bleed, but like depending on how bad and how bad you're jacked up and how much your body is involved in that wound, you can easily die from a venous bleed.
Would that be like a gunshot that doesn't hit an arterial?
That can be, yep. Or you fall and I remember when I was a Boy Scout, right? I was at camp and this little kid was running around, and he tripped, fell, got a stick, like right here, right? Got a vein, right? Just impaled him. Luckily, the camp medic was a trauma nurse and she was able to square him away and get him evac. But that can also be really serious as well.
Sorry, so you said 5 minutes is about for an arterial bleed before you die. What's a rough number? I know it depends, I'm sure, but is there like a number by chance for the venous?
Possibly.
2 minutes, man. Go for like the most conservative estimate.
So I could say like maybe like 10 minutes depending on the bleed. Right on. But also at the same time, no, for a vein.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But also when you're thinking about these types of wounds, right? Like how long have they been bleeding before you got to them? How fast are you getting your interventions out? How long is it taking you to expose that wound and place an intervention, or that's what you call like your dressing, right? How long is it taking you to do that, right? So, seconds count, man, and we don't really know what's going on. What's this person's medical history like, Maybe they're diabetic, so when they're losing that blood and, that's impacting their overall blood sugar even worse, right? That's exacerbating. There's so many different variables where it's just like, if you see something, just rock out and get it done as fast as you can.
One more question.
Yeah.
What's like a couple signs to look for to apply a tourniquet? Because I know there's a lot of situations or certain things or certain times you shouldn't apply a tourniquet. People think you should sometimes, but it can actually make it worse.
That video, the riots, when like guy had a bruise and he's like, get a tourniquet.
Yeah, see, exactly. Like, is there certain signs that you would like for instance, to tell an arterial bleed right away, like, oh, I need to get a TQ on that? Because
yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. So first of all, it's bright red blood, right? Where venous blood is darker, looks kind of muddier, like almost, like that bougie Trader Joe's ketchup. You can also, if it's like squirting out at like the pace of a heartbeat, right? And it's going to be fast, right? Because their heart's pumping. They're they got that adrenaline going. But if you're not sure, just apply a tourniquet, right? You can, in at least, in like an urban area or in a developed country, you can probably get that patient to a doctor in an ER well before they have to have it amputated. With proper management, it's about, like with a trained medic, right? Probably like 6 hours before you actually have to lose that limb. So, if you're not sure, let's get off the clock and then reassess, right? Some people say, oh, don't put a tourniquet on me. That's going to be your own personal your own personal choice what to do. I've never seen anybody who needed a tourniquet say they didn't want one, right? And then
is there a DNR type of thing with servicing like that?
when I was a medic, there was on the civilian side, I remember, when I was doing like EMT training. But if none of you are like, so here's the crazy part, right? If none of you are certified medical providers, you're covered under like something called like the Good Samaritan Act, right? So as long as you're well intentioned and you're trying, like you're fine. But if you're like an EMT and you did the same thing, and you know somebody didn't want to be resuscitated or that want their limb saved or something, they could potentially go after you. But only a jerk would do that. But the world's full of them. So a lot of good questions, right? So like when we're identifying what's the right type of bleed for the right intervention, it's going to take some judgment. Like get on YouTube or the internet or wherever like the dankest videos are. And then you can see, you know, with everything going on in the world right now, there's no shortage of combat medic footage, I'm sure, that you can find coming out of Ukraine, and probably the Israelis are uploading it as we speak. And see what that kind of stuff looks like, right? It's going to be a lot bloodier and messier than what you see on TV. I can tell you that much. The television and movies sanitize that stuff. So now that we kind of understand these types of bleeds, right, we want to think about what type of equipment do we want to address them. One of the biggest traps I see, right, in the shooting community, or you know, when I got into hunting or just kind of any new hobby, you get sucked into the gear trap, right? You got to get all like the cool guy tactical stuff. That doesn't have to be the case. Matter of fact, get the bare minimum you need, as inexpensive as you can. Go for quality over quantity. So you can just get like a little pouch, just like so, from your Army surplus store. This is actually what I had when I was in the Army. You know, for your individual first aid kit or your IFAC, and you carry that stuff on there. And every time you go shooting, right, make sure you have that first aid kit. Make sure everybody knows where that first aid kit. And then if we're going to be a group of people that shoot together all the time, let's all carry our first aid kit in the exact same spot. So that way, if John gets hurt, I'm not sitting there thinking like, oh, where does John keep his first aid kit? Because you're going to use the patient's first aid kit on them, right? So this is actually for me. So I'm going to selfishly show you guys how to save my life here, in case I accidentally hurt myself. So as far as like a first aid kit goes, right, I have a few things in here, and they're all kind of, notice how it's all tied down. Except for these. First of all, you want to keep everything tied down, because obviously when you're stressed out and you have a patient, people are flailing, moving around, there's chaos, right? You want to have everything attached to you. Remember, in shooting or emergency medicine, you are operating in a world of chaos, and you want to be able to control as many variables as you can, because everything will go wrong, right? If you let it. I also have my tourniquet right here. Notice that my tourniquet is actually ready to go. I can slip this on, right? You don't keep keep like your bandages in the packaging still, but don't keep your tourniquet in the package. Actually get out and test it. Do a QC inspection. You can check that out if you want. And just, you know, make sure it's ready to go, because remember, seconds count, because you're going to die in minutes, if even, right? Depending on how long it takes. You also want to have some trauma shears, that you can get some like good quality trauma shears. I buy most of my stuff from North American Rescue. I'm slowly kind of replenishing a lot of expired stuff I had from when I was in the military, but get some trauma shears, because you're going to want to expose that wound as well. And then if we're operating with a tourniquet, you want a Sharpie. When everything calms down, right? Don't make this your priority, but when everything calms down, write T in the time, right? That you like on the forehead or something, or somewhere where it won't come off with sweat. So the next echelon of care, the person you're handing that patient off to, knows when that tourniquet was put on. Worst case scenario, use their blood. Yes, sir.
I've heard of people recommending, is this true? This is more of a question. So
Uh-huh.
I've heard people recommending to leaving this like that, so
Yep.
you're, what's this called, windage? Or
That's it's a windlass on a cat tourniquet.
So I heard that the leaving this like this, so that way if you are in a stressful situation, you're not going to have to try to like move that away.
100%.
Is that something that?
Yeah, you just corrected my tourniquet, so thank you.
I was just wondering, because that's how.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just didn't know if I was just doing it because I was told. Or...
Right?
Right on, brother. I just curious.
No, that's great. Thank you for pointing that out. Awesome. Right? You want everything you want to be ready to go, right? We're ready to rock, because we don't want this to be the first time we're touching anything. You know what I mean? The other stuff I have in here, and you can add more stuff, but I have gauze. You can buy that at CVS, man. You don't even have to go to North American Rescue. You want it to be kind of in the sterile or clean packaging, but really you just want to stop the bleeding. Like the doctor will worry about antibiotics. And then a couple other things. Yes, what's up?
Sorry, man.
Yeah, you're good, man.
So as far as the gauze, I just got some like quick clot gauze. Is that something that you recommend? Or
Yes.
Is that like, okay.
But keep both.
Okay.
You don't always need both. And I'll talk about the quick clot gauze here in a minute. Keep some surgical tape, but make sure it's tabbed, like my tourniquet wasn't, right? Because you don't want to, because this is like Southern California, right? Like it's going to get hot, stuff melts. I remember when I was in the Middle East, man, this stuff would kind of melt and adhere to itself. So tab it, right? Some gloves, right? Now, it's up to you whether or not you put on gloves. You're supposed to, but you know, if something happens to Tyler, right? I'm more concerned about, you know, whatever you got, bud, we're going to be buddies, man. You know, because we want to save the patient, but you want to put on gloves. An Israeli bandage. I have one in my medic bag that we'll play around with here in a little bit. And then stuff to secure an airway. Now, this is like a nasal pharyngeal airway where it goes into your nose. We can talk about that at another day. That's for airway management. Some of that stuff is actually required to be ordered by a medical provider, right? So if anyone's like tagging a nurse, let me know. I also need some more IVs. And then, and then also, you know, I carry a needle for a needle decompression. That's also an airway type. Well, could be bleeding as well, but that's, you know, I consider that more airway. We can talk about that on another day. So we're going to focus on just bleeding. But this is what's in my first aid kit. So I have a tourniquet, I have trauma shears, I got the marker, I've got gloves that you can glove up with. I've got some gauze, and I've got a pressure dressing. You can also create pressure dressings with gauze and just an ACE wrap as well, right? That stuff you can also get at like CVS or Walgreens or something. We'll talk about that here too. This right here is a needle decompression for like it's usually a 14.5 gauge. It's like a 14 gauge needle, I think. And we can talk about that another day, right? Because there's certain considerations.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The Israeli bandage, is that the quick clot bandage?
No, quick clot bandage is called combat gauze.
Okay.
And I have some expired combat gauze. So we're gonna see what it does when we put water on it later.
Could you clarify what it is, just because I don't have any knowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So quick clot is a powder, right? It's a coagulant. So you get it in the wound, and it stops the bleeding, right? What you're gonna want though is I always had like the quick clot in the powder form, just like I'd have 1 or 2 pouches, but that was never my go-to because just how windy was it here today, right? Like you can't control. It's harder to control in the elements. Where with the gauze, right? A lot of times you're packing a wound or you're putting it on top of a wound. Usually you want to pack a wound if it's big enough. And not only is the gauze like expanding with the blood and creating pressure internally to stop that bleeding, it's also got the coagulant in there as well. That'll react with your vein or whatever to stop that bleeding.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then what is the Israeli bandage?
Let's check it out, man. So, good question. There we go.
So, is there too deep for that clot?
Oh, for it to be effective?
Yeah. Is there something that's considered too deep of a
No, I mean, just if you're packing a wound, right? Just pack it till you can't pack it anymore, man.
I mean, with gauze, or I was talking about the quick clot.
You know, if that's what you got, you know, go for it. You know, it's not going to kill the guy. You know what I mean? More so than what you're treating. You know what I mean? So,
Already on his way out, brother.
But will it make it harder for the doctors to be able to do their job?
no, I mean, they're going to have to pull all that stuff out anyway, right?
I thought we were going to hear the tampon question, so I'll ask it. Do you carry a tampon in your
I-
medical kit?
I don't right now, but I used to.
Yeah, they work, bro.
It really does work, huh?
Yeah. Oh, some guys, and then plus they got that string on there, so it makes it easy to pull out, right? Like, dude, I had this one guy though. He's like, "Don't you ever fucking put that in me?" I was like, "Man, stop projecting your insecurity, bro." You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna do what I want to do, because I'm a medic. All right. So this is an Israeli dressing, right? And there's Israeli bandage. It's a pressure dressing, right? Always save the packaging because you can use those. You can use those for a chest seal. Just tape it down. So basically, what you're gonna do is you're gonna place that on the wound just like so, right? And you're always applying pressure. So you're like this, and then the other hand you're actually like putting it in, and then you're gonna go ahead Bring
Is it
that.
okay to have them help you out if they're conscious?
Absolutely, right? And a matter of fact, you depending on the situation.
Is that going over the clothes just like that?
Yeah,
Or
it's just
cutting
going
the
over.
clothes off and then putting it on.
Depends on the urgency of the situation. Always expose the wound when you can, right? But now that we're in here, we're gonna pull it back. Sorry, this has kind of been used a few times, and you're actually gonna create that pressure, right? And you're gonna keep wrapping until all the way you're just gonna hook this in. And so let's make that be our first exercise today. So if I can get 2 volunteers, please. Tyler and Steve. Who wants to be the patient?
Tyler, what?
I'll be the patient.
All right.
No love in an elevator.
Use his third leg.
Oh, I thought that was a finger.
You need a band-aid instead of a
Okay.
daily bandage.
So what you're gonna do here, right? Because essentially you're gonna it's gonna be wrapped, right? And so, or it's gonna be kind of folded. And so what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna want to expose this. You're gonna expose the wound, right? And then kind of when you can, like you're already putting pressure. So you're just gonna be like, boom, you're cutting through, right? And then you're gonna expose it real quick just to put that on top. And then you're always putting that pressure on there. And this is why training is so important, because you got to learn to do things one-handed if you want to do it expeditiously. And so, matter of fact, Tyler, if you want to sit down right here, we can. There you go.
Also, I know they're going to demonstrate
Mhm.
real quick. When you're overlapping the bandage around, does it matter, like, once you get the initial layer, having it flattened out?
I mean, you want to, like, if you can, but just go ahead, and you want to make it as tight as possible on there. So let's just say you expose the wound.
Right.
There you go. And then you're going to put that on top. Boom. Like you've done this before, right?
No.
Well, it looks like it, man. Good job. And so what we're going to do here is you exactly get it through, and you'll notice like this little plastic thing right here. Go, and then we want to try and flatten this out if we can, so it evenly disperses the pressure.
So do you only go over the one side of it like that?
Usually on a newer bandage, it'll be able to catch, but I've been
want to open up at both and pull opposite.
exactly. But I've been playing with this a bunch, right? This is my training aid, so.
This is good training, dude.
And then you're just gonna go ahead, keep doing that. Boom, beautiful. It's looking good.
How's that feel, Tyler?
Nice and tight.
Nice and tight like your date on prom night. You know what I'm saying? Like, there you go.
Are you supposed to be getting a little chub at the same time, or how's
I
that?
mean, the blood's flowing, bro. Blood is flowing.
What? This hooks in the back?
Yeah, it hooks onto the sides.
fabric?
On the sides, exactly.
Okay, so it just hooks on the
Exactly.
fabric. Okay.
So now here's my thing: is that for venous and
You just hooked it on
It can be, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you apply a tourniquet, you still want to dress the wound, and we'll talk about tourniquets here in a little bit when we get up to that, right? You still want to dress the wound. You don't want to leave anything exposed. But yeah, absolutely, you want to keep it stuck there. But you notice, like, boom, right there, it's nice and tight. You've got the bandage on the wound, and it's applying pressure. So if you do have a venous bleed or just something that's not an arterial bleed, this is usually a go-to. Even if you're like, is it that serious, right? Just go ahead and slap the pressure dressing on there anyway, right? Like there's, it's not like he's gonna lose the leg or anything like that. So let's, after Steve undoes this, we'll try it one more time with 2 other people, and then we'll go on to tourniquets.
That's a risk of tourniquet though too, right?
What is?
Stopping the blood flow for too long.
Yeah, but in turn you save their life.
Then you say 6 hours.
Yeah, it's about 6 hours with proper management, right? But that's probably going to be a little more advanced than what we're doing today. But honestly, like if you slap a tourniquet on, wherever we are, we're going to be able to get a patient to the next echelon of care, so to speak, whether it's the ambulance or a hospital or a clinic, likely before they lose that limb.
Is there, with tourniquets, is there a certain amount you're supposed to turn? Or
Until
how tight it needs to
until you can't feel the pulse anymore.
I got a question on just the exact same thing. So, well, that was crazy. What I've always been told is basically you tighten that thing down until the bleeding stops.
Yep.
But I always get questions of like, well, when do you?
Yeah,
when
no,
does it
thank you.
stop? It never stops. But basically, the way I've always been taught is
Right on.
you tighten it, you crank it down. Until it stops.
Yeah, you always crank that tourniquet down till the bleeding stops, and then crank it again. Just one more turn if you can, right? Like you know, the goal here is we want to save their life. They're going to be in pain. They're like, no, it's good, it hurts. Like, don't worry, pain is the patient's problem. You're there to save their life. You know what I'm saying? So can I get 2 more volunteers like you guys right here? Who wants to be the patient?
Either or, it don't matter.
I'll be
Okay,
the patient.
sweet.
We're doing it on leg.
Yeah, or you can do it on an arm. Let's do an arm.
Alright.
So we're going to do his arm, man. We got like a venous bleed.
It's the same thing, but on the arm.
Yeah, same thing, right? So what we're gonna do is you're gonna have this.
It'll be up here though, right?
So we'll go through the motion, right? We'll pretend we're like exposing the wound, boom, and then you're applying pressure as you're getting your bandage out. You're like chewing through the packaging and that kind of stuff, right? And then boom, you're gonna slap that on there, and you're gonna wrap that around. Excellent, man, doing good. Put it
now
through.
this is where you want to fan that out and bring
Right.
it back.
These will go down too, right? So just shove that thing down there. You know what I mean? There you go, man. That's looking great. And notice it's kind of a pain in the butt. It's like unraveling and stuff like that. That's why we train, right? So your stuff isn't flying everywhere, or it might, but you know how to manage that. You know how to deal with it. That's why training is so important.
Vamonos.
I'm trying, brother. I'm trying.
Does the pressure feel pretty
He's gonna
tight?
lose his arm, David.
It didn't at first, but once a couple wraps come in, you can feel it a little bit more.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right?
And then, what do I do with this one?
You see these edges? You just find some edges that's not the actual gauze part or padded part, and do both sides. We want to secure both sides. Damn. That's hands down one of the most common bandages I've given. You know what I mean? You just did it right
In
here.
the arm.
Or on the leg or somewhere, like a pressure dressing, right? Like,
How's it feel?
just boom. Tight?
Yeah.
Well, we see
It
the
feels
arm.
like a blood cuff.
Yeah.
Seen a leg, arm. But
Feels
I
like
want
a
to
blood
see.
cuff once it pumps up.
Can David do a hand job now?
It might not
Only
feel
for a
the same.
minute.
Yeah.
Only for a minute.
Actually,
Then
Yeah, let me
you
wrap
use
this thing
sensation.
around it, brother.
Yeah, go ahead.
This thing's definitely too big for me.
sleeper.
Why is it so teethy?
Because it's his first time.
It's okay. We're all here to learn, you know? All here to learn.
Stupid.
Come on, this is my trigger arm, dude. I'm just
I
That's why you need to learn how to shoot ambidextrous, my man.
You know what, dude, maybe what's
Blindfolded.
I don't know what's
I don't know if you've seen
That's a huge point.
Equilibrium, but that gun fu, baby.
Yeah.
that movie's kind of scary, honestly.
Yeah, good job.
All right.
Thank
So-
you.
Thank you. No, so now that we've kind of have this going, right? There's also other ways that we can create pressure dressings. Let me go ahead and just get this back in here before I forget.
More of the improvised nature.
Yep.
Oh yeah. I love this stuff. This is where creativity takes over.
So one thing, like part of being a medic, is we used to always say you're building rocket ships out of 2x4s, right? Because you have to be really creative. A lot of the types of dressings and interventions you get, like, you know, you get access to all this stuff, but it doesn't work in the field, right? It doesn't work outside of a clinical environment. But some of the other things you could do, like that's really great. But like, what if somebody's like peppered with shrapnel? You know what I mean? How would you, and you know, how would you treat that, right? So here's a beautiful thing. Gauze and freaking and an ace bandage, right? So basically what we're gonna do here.
Want me to wrap that thing up for you?
Oh, you're good, man. Ooh. It's training aid. So basically what you're gonna do, right, is you're gonna go up to your patient and it's just like a figure 8, right? Right, and you're just going up, right? As best you can. Obviously this is kind of, you want it to be flat.
This is shrapnel wounds?
Yeah, and so you're gonna do like a figure 8 kind of crisscrossing all the way up. So with this gauze, you're actually creating pressure, and then you're gonna use an ace wrap on top of it the exact same way. What's up, man?
So how do we know where the starting point is?
Just start from the bottom up, right?
So
you're squeezing the
wherever
blood
it
up.
starts from the bottom up is where you'll start.
Yep,
Why
exactly.
he said earlier that a sweep is so important is because you want to identify where the wounds are.
Yep.
When you're doing your full body sweep,
Mhm.
and however the army does it, but I'm sure
Right.
you'll cover it. But that's why it's important. You want to make sure you're capturing all the wounds.
Right?
And covering them with the gauze.
Sweet. So, so that's kind of how we're gonna improvise, and we're gonna get a couple people to try this, right? I'm gonna just roll this back up. So what's also really important too is when you get your gauze, you have two types of, you know, gauze, right? You have some that's like just completely kind of closed and sterile. And then others, like you actually have it kind of poked where a little bit of a tab's coming out because it's going to all kind of unravel. You know what I mean? And then you also want some that's rolled. So like a rolled gauze. So you have compressed gauze, that's like really great for like packing a wound, right? And then you have rolled gauze, which is kind of already where you need to be, and then that's what's going to help you do that figure 8 motion. So who wants to treat John?
Yeah.
Okay, come on up, man.
My wiener's getting hard.
Okay.
The 2 Vietnam
As long as I
vets.
get to
This fool said Vietnam. Bro, it wasn't that long ago.
I think I could do it on the opposite leg of your holster there, bud.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do, man,
Figure
for
eight.
this pressure dressing. You're going to wrap it, you're going to go from the bottom up,
From
right?
the knee up.
just from the bottom of the wound, right? From where the wounds start,
That's
right
where
under
the
it.
wound is.
So the wound is going to be, we'll just say it's like right here on the lower, on his lower
So
leg.
up to
Just
his knee.
yeah, we'll do up to the knee just to keep it easy today, right? So here you go. You're gonna, but remember what you're gonna do.
Try to flatten it.
You're gonna get on there, boom, right, and then you're gonna wrap around, right, doing a figure 8 motion up, like going up, and you want to keep it tight, right? So you're applying pressure as you're doing that. There you go. Dude, you guys are fucking studs, man, already.
Oh, it hurt.
And then so you're gonna bring it down now. Yep, there you go. And now you're gonna bring it up.
Higher up. Oh man,
Right?
I never did this before. It was my first time, and here I am.
So like,
Shut up.
so when you're doing it, now we're gonna go down,
Okay, you want to cover what was there?
and then we're gonna go up, and then as we're going up, you're gonna come down, like just like that,
okay,
right?
Okay, yeah.
Oh,
It's hard to show on myself, but it's easier when somebody else is doing it, right?
it's getting
Hashtag
cold.
management.
Oh,
So
hey, Ezra, I'm coming, baby. I'm coming home.
Don't go
All right,
to the
now what you do?
so now you just try and like tuck it in or whatever if you can, right? And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take this
Same.
ace wrap and you're gonna do the same thing, but ace wraps come with these things right here, right? These little hook things, right? So when he's done, you're gonna just be able to like pinch it down.
Hook goes on where the end is to the.
Yeah. See these hooks? It goes in there. You just pinch it down onto that, onto itself. Man, you're doing so good. So now you're gonna bring it down. There you go,
Gonna lift it.
and then up.
I'm gonna make
There you go, and then back down.
I'm trying to make shorter videos so they're not long when you send them. Just like,
And then so what you're gonna do?
I remember those all too well.
Yeah, dude.
I'll do it to you later.
Oh,
That's a
man.
good one.
I have my like wrist all up on his junk. That was on purpose though. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
you should see the face shots I got of him.
So now we see that we have this kind of improvised pressure dressing. So, you know, when we're thinking about, you know, like what are we going to put in our kit? You don't want just Israeli dressings. You want gauze and you want ace wraps as well, right? Because that gives you versatility. No wound is going to be textbook perfect, right? Once you expose that wound, you see what you're working with, you're going to have to make that kind of split decision. How am I going to treat this? And sometimes the wound pattern is too big for a for an Israeli dressing, right? Sometimes you can just put 2 on there, or you can just do this figure 8 motion. You're treating both wounds at the same time. You're conserving your supplies in case there's any other casualties as well.
18 inches of.
Mm-hmm. And this is something you can easily do. So when you buy, like when you go on to wherever it is that you buy your stuff from, make sure like you're getting it from like a reputable source. None of that, like, you know, don't get the Chinese like chest rig, but don't get the Chinese medical supplies. You know what I'm saying? But buy extra that you can train with and practice with. Like just like I have here, that's kind of already ready, right? So you're like watching TV and just instinctively not even thinking about it, right? Exactly. Or you can get like I saw there was like, we have that little jiu-jitsu doll or whatever, get something like that you can practice on. Or if, you know, you invite your buddy over and be like, hey, let's drink some beers and I'm going to practice this on you.
Bro, let me see your leg.
We used to do that when I was in the Army. Medics, we get freaking hammered and train on each other all the time, like giving IVs and stuff like that. Like I can tell you for a fact, if you can give an IV drunk, you can do it with a concussion. You know what I mean?
Oh, yo, think about that.
Right? And so it's the same thing, right? Like it just, you know how to do this stuff, but it's not like you're always in perfect shape either, right? You know, hopefully you don't ever have to do this stuff, but you have to train for like the worst case scenario. Who else wants to try this real quick?
I'm gonna try.
All right, Tyler, pick a buddy, man.
Does that sound like fully automatic?
It's not 10 rounds.
No, yeah.
I don't think it was full auto, but it wasn't 10 rounds. That's for sure. Little bump fire.
Oh man.
Make sure we're putting the gauze on first and
Yep.
then the ace wrap.
Yeah, you want to roll up the gauze real quick?
That's what they
Like roll it into like a nice little thing.
Hey, you guys seen that dude who's
Is that a
what's
bump
his name?
fire?
He's on
Did it
Greyhound
die on?
and he has
That
those
did sound like a
ATM
little.
Goes out.
Yeah.
Like, you just did the little thing where you
A
put
controversial opinion though, bump fire is kind of whack, man. It's like you can't even control where you're shooting it.
It's usually at your hip too.
You're just doing it to just be defiant.
Yeah,
You know, you're just
I
like,
would do it because I was walking next to the door.
Yeah, or you
I only want a bump stock because the government said I can't have one. You know what I mean?
How do you guys feel about the binary triggers? I think I'd forget a little too much.
I don't like anything that takes control away from.
Yeah.
I'll be full on libertarian and say the government doesn't have the right to regulate it, but me personally, I want full on control of that weapon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine for now, right? And so basically, what you're gonna do is you're gonna approach it, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna approach it just like so, like that, where it's kind of rolling around. So it's like,
It's like a round on.
you know what I'm saying? So not like that, because that's kind of awkward. You want it to unravel it on itself. Yeah.
And then are you holding pressure like you showed us with the?
Absolutely.
Okay.
As long as you can until you have to. You always hold pressure with your hand or your knee or whatever, like whatever body part, as long as you can until you have to do the dressing, right?
Okay.
Until you have to move it to apply the dressing.
And is this one like figure 8, like you're saying, or is this
Yeah.
one kind of going around?
Figure 8. So remember, you always go in opposite direction. So you're gonna go up and then down and then up and then down, right? Just like he was doing.
Right on.
You do the same thing with that.
Exactly. Do
Yeah,
same
cross
thing.
that for a second, but you'll get it.
Yeah. Boom.
Have you seen the?
So now we're gonna go up. Now we're gonna go up the limb because we're gonna start at the bottom of the wound and work our way up. Because remember, as we're applying pressure upward, right? We want to push blood up towards the vital organs.
Oh, okay, got it.
That's more important than your leg. You can get one of those cool mechanical Anakin Skywalker limbs, dude.
Dude, hell yeah.
Might even pull Natalie Portman. God bless her.
Dude, fuck, if I can get one of those, let's do a real drill. Shoot my leg.
All right, I'm in.
Cool, man.
We're gonna have to edit that part out. Tyler.
Definitely editing that part out. And then you're gonna do the exact same thing.
Yeah, none of this is gonna have audio. It's gonna be voiceover.
Donut operators. Quack,
We'll just
quack.
play some elevator music over it.
All right, everybody, don't forget to turn to the camera. In.
He's a trained professional.
Once upon a time. Right, but there's all sorts of classes you can go. Actually, the state of California has like this website. I'll have to go dig it up and I'll send it to Tyler to give to everybody.
Yes,
But it's like the emergency management. It's just like a list of all these places you can get emergency medical training in California.
Alligator clips go. Is this Tyler?
Yeah. So the clips, what you're gonna do,
Tucked it in, but that works.
you can do that too, actually. But if you're gonna do that, where did you tuck it in?
Right in the back.
Right. So that you're just gonna want to. I mean, we don't have to do it now, but we're just gonna want to. There you go. Just bring it here, and then just clip it back in.
They have
literally-
teeth
you
that
just
go
clip
the
it.
Yeah,
opposite
David,
way.
you
just
clip
pull it.
one side, then
And pull it.
Pull it, and then just
Literally
Oh,
let
pinch
slide
it.
against the other side.
pull and pinch. There you go, and then use the other one.
I think from riding dirt bike and skateboards, I've had a lot of those.
Oh, absolutely.
Myself, dude.
If you were on bikes or skating or anything, you have absolutely used these a ton of times.
On my leg.
Is it nice and tight?
Does it feel good?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
right on.
man.
So,
Good job, dude.
So already, like first time we're talking about this, you guys are already crushing it, right? You guys are comprehending. You're doing the interventions well. The only thing that's going to make you better is practice, practice, practice.
that makes sense. You gotta train with it, huh? More and more reps.
Exactly. So, if you look at like Tyler's Instagram, right? Like he's always like doing drills, you know what I mean? Like drawing or like transitions or stuff. Same thing for your dressings, man. Practice it. And then you can, once you're feeling confident, go and do like burpees until you feel like you want to die, and then go do the dressing, right? Go do some kettlebell swings, right? Like go lift some weights, go do some push-ups, get your heart going and really stress your body. Because if you can do this when your body's under stress, then, hopefully that's going to be your weakest point in training. And if something happens, you're going to be a lot more prepared, right?
Yeah. That makes sense, dude. So after this one, is it kind of just, are we going to tourniquet next, or what?
Yeah, we're going to do tourniquet and then a blood sweep.
Got it.
Tourniquet's really easy, man. Like there isn't a lot of finesse there.
I feel that's harder than.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Especially under pressure. I
being the
feel.
volunteer, brother. I'll roll these up for you.
Oh, I appreciate you, man. Okay, so
Thank you, bro.
pulse check. How are we feeling so far with the pressure dressings?
Good.
When would we apply a pressure dressing?
As soon as you need artillery.
Venous bleed, right?
Venus, please. Yeah.
Right? And then how do I identify a venous bleed?
Darker.
A little darker.
Darker color.
darker, muddy.
slower.
Not as
It's
fast.
kind of
Oozing?
on the verge of
Slower
coagulation,
discharge.
correct?
Not always, right? Because if it's because of a venous bleed can bleed fast enough to where it's not coagulating yet, right?
What's the difference in the coagulating? What is that? Is that like?
Coagulate is when it jellifies.
Okay, good.
That's
When an egg makes scrambled eggs.
Got it.
yeah. It's a
That's disgusting.
And that's a sign of an
When it
arterial.
coagulates in
no blood just coagulates,
Oh, okay.
right? So when the bush beat me up earlier, right, and it stopped bleeding, it's because the blood coagulated essentially.
Got it.
So that's a little, what is it, capillary?
Yeah, this would have been a capillary bleed, very surface level. So now we're gonna let me get some of this shit out of my pockets here.
EDC shakedown. What are you carrying? Chapstick? Okay.
It's to keep my.
Hand lotion. All right.
Well, you have Jergens at the range, bro. Don't fucking judge me, man. Like,
It's butter, baby.
I'm trying to be my authentic self. All right, so it's really easy, right? When you do a tourniquet, right? Because we have this kind of, ready to go. You want it ready to go over like your fattest limb. So if you got them old tree trunk legs because you do squats all the time, God bless you for not skipping leg day. Just get it on over there. Ideally, you want to be able to put on your own tourniquet, and then if somebody puts on their own tourniquet, that you're always going to inspect it, right? So typically, when I used to train and do this stuff in the military, we would actually do this until you can't feel the pulse. I'm going to advise against doing that today because we don't know everybody's medical history and that kind of stuff, and insurance and yada yada yada. But we're going to go through the motions, right?
Can you also rupture anything?
I mean, you'll definitely get some bruises, man. Yeah, you'll definitely be all
Like
bruised up.
capillary stuff.
Yeah, it's just, and you look cool too. Like when I was in medic school, man, we'd be going around San Antonio with like bruises from tourniquets and then track marks on our arms and stuff like
Oh,
that.
they thought y'all was heroin, man.
Oh man, they knew better because they just knew that's where the Army Medical Corps was, right? So everybody just kind of knew at that point. It's like you see a young dude, clean cut, looking like a heroin addict. No, he's just in the Army. So basically, you're just gonna throw it on there, and then you want it to be like above, 4 to 6 inches above the wound if you can. But depending on the situation that you're applying this, right? Like, hopefully you're never doing this, while somebody's shooting at you or anything like that, But in case somebody is or they're trying to harm you, just get it all the way up, right? Try and expose the wound if you can. So if you're in a safer environment, you're going to expose the wound. If it's really like, hey, I got to slap this thing on and drag this guy out, right? Then do that. You know what I mean? And then you always reassess. So another thing too, whenever you dress a wound, we call it an intervention. You're constantly reassessing your interventions, right? You don't set it and forget it. You're always reassessing. And so what we're going to do here, right, is we're going to get this little lock right here where the windlass goes over the wound, or like kind of on the top. So you're above the wound right now, and you're just going to tighten, tighten, tighten. And notice you could do this with like one hand if you wanted to, right? And then you could also like tighten it down like so. I'm not doing the greatest job here, but boom. So it's staying in place, and then we're just gonna tighten, tighten, right? Tighten, tighten, and you're gonna, just like John said, until you stop seeing the blood come out, right? And then earlier, right? We talked about pulses, right? Why am I talking about pulses? Because when I'm done, I'm gonna check that femur right up here, make sure that works, and then I'm going to check behind the knee and the foot, right? So we're always kind of confirming our work. We're working up here, beautiful. I don't feel anything back here. I don't feel anything on the top of my foot, right? That's how we know it's good. And then once it's done, you just...
That's how you know it's tight enough. Sorry, I was
Yeah.
doing that. So when you put the tourniquet on, you said go about 6 inches above the 8 to 6 inches above the wound.
4 to 6.
4 to 6.
I mean, if you got the room, right?
Above the wound.
Do what you got to do, though.
And then you tighten it until you don't feel any pulses below the wound.
Exactly. And then you always want to make sure, right? Because if you feel something weird in the pulse up here, or it's not there, that might tell you something. Like, you're constantly reassessing everything, right? You're trying to figure out like what the heck can possibly be going wrong, because you see something in front of you, but that might not be the only thing. So the point is, you're constantly thinking in your back of your head, though I'm addressing this, what else is wrong, right? Nothing is ever how it seems. So you always want to make sure. And so now we got this like on that's real tight. So, and then you want to make sure you bring this just like what Tyler mentioned, right? How I should have had it tabbed like this. You just grab it and then pull it over, right? So it's in there and it's nice and secure. Absolutely. That's the windlass right here. Absolutely.
Is that what you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a cat tourniquet. If anybody was like a Boy Scout, you'd know how to make like a tourniquet with stick and like a cravat, right? That's why Boy Scouts wear neckerchiefs. They're shaped like cravats because you can turn them into bandages, right? So let's go ahead and let's see. We haven't seen you try, like you've been a patient, not a victim. So go ahead and just try. Don't cut off your circulation though, man. We don't want you to hurt, but just go through the motion.
Yeah, you want to try my leg?
Yeah. If you want. Fuck him up.
Yeah, let me get ready to
Cheeseburger thighs. Throw that on there, brother.
All right, child. Save my leg.
Yeah, you can just send it back to around this
Thank you,
way.
bro. Thank you.
You can't have training without mustard seed, dog.
Thank you, brother.
quicker. He's bleeding out.
Right? So one thing to keep in mind, right? Like as we're, obviously you're doing a lot of things at once. Like, okay, there's nothing, or if there's anything in his pocket, like it's above, or you know what I mean? It's not trapped there, you know what I'm saying? You want all that stuff out of the way.
Sorry, what was the last part you just mentioned?
So you notice we all wear like cool cargo pockets, right? You just want to get shit out of the pockets when you can, right? Because you want that to be right on the wound, or because we're actually exposing the wound and you're cutting like it with scissors, right? You're gonna get that out of the way.
Is this another exposed wound situation?
Always expose a wound you're gonna treat, right? You want to see what you're working with, and then you want to, whenever possible, apply a bandage or an intervention directly on that wound. The only time you wouldn't would be in a scenario hopefully none of us will have to deal with, is if you are actively engaged in a fight, right?
So it'd just be tourniquet.
They call it care under fire, right? So it's that's typically the only time, right? And so then what you're gonna do is like, yeah, it's good, good to go. Tourniquets are really easy, right? Like, and you should always carry a tourniquet on you if you're shooting and that kind of stuff. Make sure everybody knows where your tourniquet is.
Yeah, redo it.
I have a kind of interesting question about the tourniquet.
I hopefully I have an interesting answer.
Because you were saying if basically like if you're having to use it, you gotta drag somebody out and you're just slapping it on.
Yep.
If their bleeding's too much and you're reassessing, do you actually want to loosen the tourniquet again to reapply it, or or is it just better practice to just not take it off? You
tighten it down. The only time you would loosen, take it off, if you put another tourniquet on above it that's tighter.
Okay.
So like what you might do is like you're just slapping that on, you're yanking them out, right? And you're like shooting, and then you apply another tourniquet after.
Even as it right now, he's not doing it tight enough to where you're gonna cut my circulation off, but it probably slows the blood flow down.
Think of it as like plumbing, right? So you got a leak, you got to stop the leak, and so in order to, you don't take the leak that's plugging it up there, you put one up a little higher.
Gotcha.
And then
Beautiful.
In fact, it's always recommended to put another tourniquet on.
Anyhow, just in general.
Yeah. Well, I let Garrison.
Just
yeah,
like time you put it,
Yeah.
like within 11 minutes. If that's
Perfect.
enough time.
Perfect. Yeah. If you want to apply it. So while you're doing that, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that is a blood sweep. Okay. A blood sweep is when you're assessing a patient, right? You want to know what's wrong with them. It's kind of like a step below what we would call a trauma assessment, where you're looking for everything. A blood sweep is like you're literally checking somebody. So can I get a volunteer that's down to lay on the ground here? Freaking John, my man.
Yeah, you haven't volunteered yet. Let's go. Man, I fucking was just stressing. Let's see if you remember.
All right.
I touched his hand.
Okay.
Watch your pistol handle going in the sand.
So right, we're always gloving up, and basically what we're trying to do is we just want to see where there's blood, right? So we're going to go up to the patient. Never hover, never do this. You're never over your patient like that. You're not teabagging him, you know what I mean? Only John. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to go up to the patient, and you're just literally like looking for blood, right? And then you like sweep it down, right?
And then check your fingers.
Yep.
Okay.
And then you're looking for blood, right? And then you're sweeping it down, right?
You know what
And
he's
then
doing
you're-
here, right?
And then
Gotta cut the ball. Sorry, go ahead.
He's just
Yeah.
warming up the oven.
we're
dividing me up in quarters.
yeah, exactly. We're going down the body, right? And then we're gonna
So every sweep you do is a
Mhm.
check, and
Arms
then
towards
Exactly.
the legs, right?
And then don't forget to check their junk, man. Take the back of your hand or cup the balls if you need to, but just get in there and check, because A, we want to see if there's any blood, but also if the patient is defecating or urinating, that is a really bad sign, right? They're getting close. You know what I mean?
Conscious too, right?
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes a conscious patient might not know everywhere they're hurt. So you still got to assess, right? When you're wounded, you're in shock and your adrenaline's going, and maybe you're in a fight or something and you're just like, oh my God, like what's going on, right? And then when you're finally done, the last thing you want to check, right? Oh, you're also like exposing their clothes, you're cutting it open if you need to, right? And then you're going to bring this over, right? Just like so. And then we're gonna check as well, right? Make sure, see if there's any like exit wounds or anything like that. And then if there's any wounds, right, we're gonna treat them right here because we don't wanna move the patient around unnecessarily, so only once. So that's why it's important to do stuff with one hand, but notice how I anatomically I got him here pretty good.
That will be for spinal injuries, correct?
We're not really worried about spinal injuries in the blood sweep, right? Typically with a spinal injury, you're gonna secure his head or his C-spine, his cervical spine, right? Like that's, and there's actually collars for that. But right here, we're just doing a basic blood sweep, right? And then give him the credit card swipe, right? Because we're gonna see if there's anything that we don't want there, right? And then when he's done, boom, right? And then we're going to finish checking. So it's really
recovery position one more time. Like to get me there. So like
so I moved his arm across, and this is also an opportunity. You can kind of do a blood sweep, right? And then right, and so I'm pulling his leg towards me, right? And notice his body's kind of staying there, but I'm holding his wrist back over here too, because sometimes, especially if you're wearing a bunch of kit, right? You're weighted and stuff like that. Your body might want to go back down. So I'm just holding him there, right? Looking at the back of his head, all that kind of stuff. Once again, give him the credit card swipe. Do it twice because we love him. And then we're going to treat any wounds that we might have right there. Because if you get shot in the chest, right, chances are there might be an exit wound, right? We might want to place another chest seal there before and then mark that, right? And then put him back down.
Ooh. What would you treat first in that scenario? The penetration or the exit?
The most serious, right? So chances are, right, if you have like an entry and an exit wound, okay. You found the entry wound or whatever. You found one side of it here already, right? And depending on what that looks like, it's going to tell you what the other side's going to look. So if it looks like an entrance wound, it's smaller. We're going to treat that. Boom, we see the exit wound. If you don't see the exit wound, then it's still in them. That's something we also want to know too, right? So when you're handing that off to the next paramedic, that patient, you're like, entry wound, no exit wound, right? If you know what they were shot with or something or penetrated with, you can tell them that as well. Like, hey, I think it was a 5.56. Especially if it's like frangible ammo or something like that too, right? If you know if it's frangible ammo, because then you got that tumbling and stuff like that. That's why that 5.56 is so gnarly.
Yeah, your drawing seriously looks like, little kids' cookies they make with their moms and shit. I love that.
That's why I joined the Navy, because he sucked at art. Right? But so just to kind of sum it up, right? I know we've been talking about this stuff for a long time. It's like an initial kind of entry level, stop the bleed. We can always do more in the future and get nastier with it. But we talked about the types of bleeding, arterial, venous, capillary. We talked about what they look like, whether it's bright red squirting blood at the pace of your pulse, or it's like kind of dark blood oozing out quickly or slowly, depending. We talked about the different types of interventions. Maybe in another Stop the Bleed class, we could talk about like managing bullet wounds more as well. We practiced a pressure dressing. We practiced an improvised pressure dressing, right, with gauze and an ACE wrap. We practiced a tourniquet, and we practiced a blood sweep. These are all things you can easily find online, right? If you want a refresher, or on somebody's social media, right? You're gonna see that probably. You can, or you film the whole thing. You could also get like the Ranger Medical Handbook or a Special Forces Medical Handbook. All that stuff's in there. That's good. That's on like Amazon or whatever, Barnes and Noble. And just practice, practice, practice. So if there's one thing that you take away from this, is you got 3 things you can practice: pressure dressings, tourniquets, blood sweeps. Practice, practice, practice. You don't need to break the bank to buy the materials for that stuff. Just, they're cheap. Like a pressure dressing, I think on North American Rescue, as of like 2 weeks ago, was like 11 or 12 bucks for an Israeli dressing. Buy a couple. You always have a few in your kit, and then one to practice with.
All right, guys, so I'm right here with Garrison. We just got done with our first Stop the Bleed class. first, I just want to thank you for all your knowledge and for sharing it out here for free. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. My pleasure. We're looking forward to having you again if you're available. If you don't mind, kind of just going over a debrief of what we just went through, and then just kind of the 3 things that you recommend training on first at home for medical and being a little bit more prepared medically.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about like the different types of bleeding, and then a few different interventions or ways that you can treat them. So like a tourniquet, a pressure dressing, and then how we would assess an unconscious patient with a blood sweep. And these are really simple interventions that you can do at home. You can practice them at home. So when you buy your gear or equipment, buy a little bit extra to practice with. So it's, you know, that's not what you're using when something happens. And it's all going to be muscle memory, right? So you're just sitting around watching TV on Zoom calls. Just go ahead and practice, and you're going to be good to go.
That makes sense, guys. Like you said, you're only going to get better with reps. So just like we train with our firearms and we train with our kit, we got to make sure we're training with medical as well. So thanks again, Garrison. We really appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video today. If you guys have any questions, suggestions, or comments, make sure to shoot me a comment down below. Thank you.